Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you who are attending today's Tech Talk, which is part of the Tech Talk X series at Digital by INSEAD or Digital at INSEAD. My name is Klaus Wertenbroch. I am a marketing professor at INSEAD. I'm really happy to welcome you all to this talk, which is going to be conducted by myself and by Stefano Puntoni, who is a marketing professor at the Wharton School. Stefano and I had the great pleasure and honor to edit an issue of the Journal of the Association for Consumer Research on Automation in Marketing and Consumption. Today's talk will provide an overview of all the exciting research that we were able actually to publish in this issue. So today's talk is a little special in the sense that we have a great mixture of both practitioners and academics in the audience. As such, we're just trying to share essentially the latest results on automation in marketing and consumption. Now, I have the task of being the MC, or at least doing the less pleasant parts of the MCing. So there's a little bit of housekeeping rules, which I need to share with you, webinar etiquette. So the audience is muted, your videos are off, the chat is closed. However, we hope that the great presentations that we're going to hear about today will generate lots of questions. So we have a Q&A tab in which we're encouraging you, asking you to submit your questions for the individual speakers. With your questions, please identify the speaker's name. And then what's also really important, hopefully we'll have lots of questions, to prioritize the questions, please, to all of you, I'm saying this, the entire audience, please vote your questions up or down. What Stefano and I will do at the very end, the last half hour of today's time slot, we will engage your questions. We will try to get the participants, rather the speakers, to answer the questions, but we will simply go in order of votes. Whoever gets the most, whichever question gets the most votes is asked. And then we'll go down the number of votes for each question. So I hope that's clear. You can vote your questions up. As I said, that's really important to prioritize them. The webinar will be recorded. Hopefully that's okay with all of you. And if you have any technical issues, please email digital@insead.edu. Stefano?
Okay, just I'd like to join Klaus to say thank you all for attending. And I think it's really exciting to have a mix of academics and practitioners to consider the impact of AI and automation on marketing and consumption. When you address a question in the Q&A, which I hope many of you will, you can please mention the speaker's name. I'd like to just say 2 words echoing also what Klaus was saying. We're very excited to be here doing this. And I think as academics, you rarely get the opportunity to have this broad view, interact with many researchers. And today, I think, is a great, in a way, endpoint for this issue. With that in mind, I'd like to thank all the authors who made basically the issue possible by sending us their great work, and who are then also here to present. We'll have 1 presenter per researcher team, but many of the papers, obviously, they have more authors. So thank you all for your work. I'd like also to thank you, the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Association of Consumer Research, Vicky Morwitz, who over 2 years ago asked us to take on this task and consider whether we would do this. And I think it's been a really interesting experience. And I hope that the issue, which probably many of you have had the chance to maybe hold if you are a member of the Association for Consumer Research, and if not, maybe browse online or enjoy otherwise. Be basically very proud with the outcome of this. Just 1 word for the speakers. We have a tight schedule. Everybody has 5 minutes. So let's try, if possible, to stick to the time as much as we can. And I don't think I have anything else to add. This is a list of the talks, a very wide set of topics, I think ranging across quite a lot of different domains that are relevant to both consumers and marketing managers. So I'm really excited about this. I should say we're going to have 8 talks, because we heard today that unfortunately Tom Novak and Donna Hoffman are not able to join us for the very last presentation. But I think we're going to have plenty of ideas to discuss. What I'm going to do now is to ask the editor-in-chief, Vicky Morvitz, to say a few words.
Thank you so much. On behalf of JACR, the Journal of the Association for Consumer Research, and ACR, the Association for Consumer Research, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us today for this webinar on JACR's most recent issue. It was published over the summer and, as you just heard, focuses on automation in marketing and consumption. Today, you'll have the opportunity to learn about some of the key findings from this issue on how firms and consumers are utilizing automation. We'll explore how automation creates value, or in some cases, constraints for consumers, and its impact on consumer choices, perceptions, and overall welfare. If you'd like to delve deeper into any of this research after the webinar, I encourage you to visit JACR's website, where you can access all the articles from this issue, along with all prior JACR issues. I'll drop a link after I'm done speaking in the chat to the website. And if you're a member of ACR, please remember you have free online access to all JACR articles. I'd like to begin by expressing my heartfelt thanks to our issue editors, Stefano and Klaus, for organizing today's webinar and for their exceptional work in co-editing and curating this important issue. I'm particularly excited about this issue, as it was one of the first I solicited as JACR's editor-in-chief, because I recognize that our field has so much to contribute to our understanding of how automation is transforming markets and consumer behavior. And I was thrilled when Klaus and Stefano not only agreed to take on this issue, but did so with great enthusiasm. I also want to join the issue editors in thanking all the authors who submitted articles, the reviewers who provided invaluable feedback, and the speakers who'll be sharing their insights with us today. Of course, I must also thank all of you who are attending the webinar, and I'm deeply grateful to INSEAD and Wharton for their assistance in hosting and organizing today's event. Finally, a big thank you goes to our managing editor, James Ellis, at the University of Chicago Press for his continuous support. James plays a crucial role in assisting the issue editors, authors, and me through the publication process, and we're immensely grateful for his dedication. Now I'd like to take just a moment to tell you a bit about JACR. As an academic journal, JACR is unique in its focus on addressing substantive problems that impact both business and society, such as the topic we're discussing today, automation in marketing and consumption. We publish 4 themed issues each year, each dedicated to exploring what consumer research has to say about a specific marketplace issue or challenge. Our field is multidisciplinary, and solving big problems like the impact of automation requires the diverse tools and perspectives that our scholars bring. I'm also thrilled to let you know that our young journal is thriving, with papers recognized for their impact. We're ranked in both Scopus and Clarivate and are listed on the Australian ABDC, the Australian Business Deans Council Journal List, and the German VHB Academic Association for Business Research Journal List. JACR's focus on substantive topics and its quick publication cycles are beneficial for authors and allow us to be a catalyst for sparking research on important topics like automation. JACR has addressed and will continue to address other crucial topics. For example, recent issues have focused on climate change and financial decision-making. Upcoming issues will explore consumer movements and activism, morality and consumption, the metaverse, consumer privacy, and experiential consumption. Please visit our website to view the call for papers for future issues on topics that are currently or soon will be seeking submissions, including collaborative approaches to create positive societal impact. That one is open now, with first submissions due by October 1st. More than words, linguistics and language in consumer behavior, time in consumption, and bodybuilding, growing the body of consumer research. We invite you to consider submitting your best work to these issues. Keep an eye on the JACR website, your email, and social media for announcements regarding future JACR issues, webinars, and conferences. Thank you once again to Stefano and Klaus for today's event, and to all of you for participating. Enjoy the webinar.
With that, we will go to Ana Valenzuela, who is a professor of marketing at ESADE in Barcelona and at Baruch College of the City University of New York. Ana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Klaus. Okay, so I'm here to present the work of this paper, the constraints. Yeah, thank you. I cannot, by the way, I cannot see the screen. I cannot see the presentation. Great, thank you. Here we are. So I'm here to present the paper published by JACR, and I want to thank the two co-editors and, of course, Vicky for her leadership in the journal. This paper is titled How Artificial Intelligence Constrains the Human Experience, and is the shared work of a whole set of co-authors. Sandra, can you move? Yeah. And I also want to thank all these co-authors, because without them, this paper would not exist. The paper happened from the interaction in the Choice Symposium, which was also organized by INSEAD. Next. Okay. And the idea behind this paper is that AI's capability creates many good in terms of increased competence and productivity, but it also brings some evil. Some of these limitations have been discussed already in the regulations by the European Union. There's also the California bill that is being discussed, but these limitations are usually discussed at the societal level and in terms of how government interacts with the systems and how these systems influence the individual from the government and the societal point of view. However, not so much is being discussed. Next, Sandra. Okay, about how AI systems can affect the individual experience of the consumers. Here, next, please. We thought and discussed three different dimensions in how the consumer process may be affected by automation or AI systems. One is access. What kind of access consumers have to options and products? Second, how these systems represent the preferences. And third, how the interactions get constrained by the system itself. These three views of the consumer process bring forth three mechanisms that are potentially constraining the consumer experience. The first one is what we called agency transference. You have here the definition. It's the manipulation of decision-making trajectories in ways that constrain self-determination. For each of the mechanisms, I'm going to bring one example of a phenomenon. For agency transference, the example is what we are calling the loss of serendipity. Sandra, next, please. Okay. The example here is Blockbuster. I don't know if any of you remembers, most probably you do, our video store experiences in which we would go, we would meet people, we would talk to the storekeeper, other friends that maybe would bump into in those stores, and maybe they recommended an option that we were not thinking about, that we had never encountered in the past. That serendipity would broaden our consumption options. Since AI systems are only using past behavior to make these recommendations, that serendipity is now lost. Interestingly, the pendulum is swinging back, and Blockbuster is making a revival, at least in LA. The second mechanism that we discuss in this paper is what we call parametric reductionism. This is the translation of human behavior and, most importantly, the preference structure of humans into a set of independent, computationally readable variables, parameters, and formulae. An example of a phenomenon connected to it is what we call preference misalignment, which means that the weight consumers give to the different elements of the preferences may be different to the weight the AI algorithm is actually assigning. Here, maps, for example, Google Maps is a very good example, because sometimes you may want to take the route that is most effective or fast or efficient, but sometimes you may want to take the route that is most beautiful and most enjoyable. An AI system, by default, would not understand these two contextual situations that define your preference weights. To this, Sandra, we can continue. Some alternative navigation apps are providing the option of contextually adjusting the weights in the decision algorithm. Our third mechanism is what we call regulated expression, which is that the way you talk to the algorithm affects what you do. An example here, I see you, Klaus, is what we call restricted modality. Next. And that's, for example, that we are using words now to create videos when before we use storyboards. Next. The framework, as it is explained in the paper, includes these three mechanisms in terms of, and I only have one more thing to say, in terms of implications for practitioners. Sandra, for practitioners, is your chance to become a consumer advocate and to design AI systems for human expansion, for example, building in exploratory behavior or allowing personalization of preference structures. And for public policy, is the moment to develop a consumer bill of rights and to empower the consumer through education, for example, to understand that AI systems are machines and not humans. Next. Thank you, everyone. This paper is, in fact, free to download. So if you thought these ideas were interesting, please download it and share your thoughts with us. These are my emails. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, we will go to the next presentation.
Should I just take over?
No far, yes. I was going to mention your name.
Thank you.
Assistant professor at the Marshall School at the University of Southern California.
That is me. Are you guys seeing my slides? No?
Yes, we see them.
Oh, okay, great. So, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Nofal Douani. I'm an assistant professor at USC, like Klaus just said. I'm really excited to share this research with you, which I've been working on with the wonderful Alex Barish and Vicky Morwitz. And in this project, we look at demographic pricing in the digital age, and specifically, we explore consumers' fairness perception in algorithmic versus human-based price discrimination. So in 2019, New York Times investigation reported that Apple Card was being investigated following gender discrimination complaints. The investigation was kickstarted after one outraged consumer took to Twitter to complain that he was given 20 times the credit limit that his wife was given. Oh, wait, sorry, I'm just seeing my video is not on, right? How's that? Better? Sorry. The slides are still showing, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So he complained that he was given 20 times the credit limit his wife was given, even though they filed taxes jointly, and even though he actually had a lower credit score than his wife did. And so when his wife contacted the company to inquire about the situation, the company representative told her something to the effect of, I don't know why this is happening, but I swear we're not discriminating. It's just the algorithm. And so this example raises an important question, which is, when might companies benefit from highlighting the role that algorithms instead of people play in their decision-making processes? So in today's digital world, we know that companies have access to more data than ever before. In the context of pricing in particular, advancements in data processing and unprecedented access to consumer-level data has drastically improved companies' abilities to estimate consumers' willingness to pay and to tailor prices to individual consumers. And so fueled by these advancements, pricing decisions, which were previously made strictly by humans, are increasingly being delegated to algorithms. So to illustrate, a simple search, Google search for price discrimination tool, revealed all of these different technologies or algorithms and tools that help companies tailor prices to individual consumers, basically implement price discrimination practices. Now, even though regulators and academics have extensively debated the ethical implications of this enhanced price discrimination capabilities, we actually know very little about how consumers perceive algorithmic price discrimination. So in our research, we focus specifically on demographic price discrimination, on this practice of charging consumers different prices based on demographic characteristics, things like age, gender, race, and ethnicity. And although this is common, the practice is very controversial. So, for example, Tinder faced significant backlash when it was discovered that it charged users over the age of 30 more for its premium services. Consumers also expressed outrage at gender-based differences in prices. So a New York Times investigation, for instance, revealed that women typically pay more, not typically, often paid more at the dry cleaners in New York City, even to wash the same item as men. And this led former Mayor Bill de Blasio to conduct a citywide study of the pink tax, which concluded that women's products cost 7% more than similar products for men in the city. Consumers also fumed when a ProPublica report revealed that Asian students were nearly twice as likely to get a higher price from Princeton Review for their SAT prep courses. Now, in our research, we examined perceptions of demographic-based pricing like this and how they change when an algorithm rather than a person is responsible for setting prices. So participants in our study, in all of our studies, follow like a very similar empirical approach. They imagine that they were planning to purchase a specific product, a different product in each study, and then we tell participants that the price of the product that they have found is not fixed, and that it in fact changed across consumers based on demographic characteristics. Crucially, we tell half of the participants in our sample that the agent responsible for setting prices is an algorithm, while the rest are told that a human manager is responsible for setting prices. And across all of our studies, we consistently find that participants rate the price as fairer when it is said to be determined by an algorithm rather than by a person. We also find that the price setting process, the process used to implement these price discrimination practices, is seen as fairer when it is executed by an algorithm. And this in turn increases consumers' willingness to purchase. So consumers are more willing to purchase these products. I see your clouds. I'll be 1 second. We also investigate why and when this is happening. And specifically what we find is that this effect is driven by consumers' reduced sense of judgment. So they don't feel as judged by algorithms as they do by people. They're less likely to feel exploited. And they feel that the decision is more justified when it is coming from an algorithm rather than from a person. Accordingly, we find that this effect attenuates under temporal price discrimination, that is under dynamic pricing when prices change over time, and it diminishes under pro-social demographic price discrimination. For example, when consumers are told that the practice is there to reduce gaps across, to help disadvantaged consumers. So just to summarize, our research suggests that algorithms, these tools which are making price discrimination more common than ever before, might also act to legitimize them in the eyes of our consumers. This is obviously a critical warning for consumers and for policymakers. Because algorithms seem less unfair, they might prevent consumers from sounding the alarm on practices that they would previously consider unjust. Now, obviously, companies' price discrimination practices are going to continue to evolve in scope and in complexity, and as such, norms around what consumers consider to be normative or fair market behavior will continuously update and be challenged. And so we end on a call for more research to explore these new practices and to examine how consumers react to the use of technology in price setting. Thanks very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Nofar. Very good. We can see actually in the Q&A that the questions are starting to accumulate. Again, I would just ask that everybody identify the speaker to whom the question is directed. And with that, we'll go to Stuti Agarwal, who is a PhD student in consumer behavior at the Harvard Business School. Stuti, the floor is yours. We can't hear you, Stuti. Your mic is off.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stuti, and I'll be presenting the paper titled Acceptance of Automated Vehicles is Lower for Self Than Others. And I did this paper in collaboration with my co-authors, Julian and Anya and Carrie. So this paper essentially looks at a barrier of consumer adoption to automated vehicles or AVs. And what we know so far about this literature is that they have mostly focused on how buyers' perceptions of the AV itself leads to low adoption. But our contribution in this paper is how buyers' perceptions of self can also be a barrier to adoption. In particular, we focus on the self-enhancement bias, which is the tendency to believe that you yourself are better than other people at any given task. And in this case, it would be driving. And we try to explore what happens when you add AVs to the comparison set. So we know that people think of themselves as better than other drivers, but do they also think of themselves as better than AVs? And how do people compare other drivers to AVs is the question that we're trying to answer here. And that leads us to our main research question, which is whether preference for automated vehicles is actually lower for self than others, and why. So we answer our research question using two main studies. And the goal of the first study is to show that actually preferences for automation is indeed lower for self than others. And we did this by running the study on lucid theorem with a nationally representative sample of participants. Participants were randomly assigned to one of two conditions, either the self condition or the others condition. And first, they were shown this table that contains the information on the 6 different levels of automation and which task in each level of automation is controlled by either the human or the machine. Then participants rated their automation preferences, and they also rated perceptions of trust and safety in either their own driving abilities or the driving abilities of other people, depending on the condition that they were assigned to, and they did this relative to AVs. Quickly moving on to the results. As you can see here in the self-conditioned, participants did have a lower automation preference. And then after averaging safety and trust into a single index, we also see that participants had perceptions of higher safety trust in their own driving skills relative to AVs, whereas they had perceptions of lower safety and trust in other people's driving skills relative to AVs. So that was a quick overview of study 1. Study 2 was replication of study 1, but the focus here was more on isolating the role of self-enhancement bias as the mediator. And so we ran this study on Prolific, and we had the same two conditions, self versus others. The dependent variable, which was automation preference, was the same as study 1. We also had a new secondary DV in this study, which was purchase preference for a fully automated or a level 6 vehicle. And finally, for trust and safety measures in this study, we used absolute measures such that participants first rated trust and safety perceptions in either their own driving skills or other people's driving skills, and then independently rated how they felt about trust and safety of AVs. Quickly looking at the results, again, we replicated the main effect from the previous study, and we saw that preferences for automation were actually lower for self than others. And as you can see, purchase preferences for a fully automated vehicle was also, in fact, lower for self than it was for other people. And then looking at the safety trust results, in just the self condition, we answered the first part of the self-enhancement bias, such that people do think of themselves as better drivers than AVs. However, in the others condition, we see a reversal of this, and people actually think of other human drivers as worse than AVs. Across the two conditions, again, we see the evidence of self-enhancement bias, such that people think of themselves as better than AVs, or other drivers, sorry. And then across the two conditions, we saw no differences in how participants rated the AVs itself. And so a quick summary of our findings is that consumers are indeed less accepting of automated vehicles for themselves, and this can be attributed to the fact that they have biased perceptions of self, such that they believe that they are better than other drivers as well as AVs, but they might be more accepting of automated vehicles for other people because they actually believe that other drivers are worse than AVs. Practically, our findings are relevant because, as you can see, certain AV companies like Waymo and Zoox actually use safety as the primary benefit in their marketing campaigns for AVs. And based on our findings, these marketings might not be as effective as these companies believe. And in such cases, it might actually be better to focus marketing campaigns or interventions on other attributes of AVs, such as convenience, time saving, or sustainability. Or alternatively, if they want to continue focusing on safety attributes, then it might be better to do that when the car is being purchased for someone else. For example, if a parent is buying a car for their teenage child, in that case, they might value safety more. Or alternatively, Companies can also focus on trying debiasing interventions at the point of purchase to reduce the impact of self-enhancement bias on purchase decisions. I see you, Klaus. And yeah, these debiasing interventions might actually be costly, and they might consume a lot of time, so more research is required on this end in the practical implications. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful, Stuti. Thank you so much. Our next presenter is Sonia Seung-Un Kim, postdoctoral researcher at the Yale School of Management and the Yale Center for Customer Insights.
I hope everybody can see my screen. All right. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Sonia Kim, and I'm delighted to share this paper with my co-author, Don Lehman. Many different services utilize personalized recommendations, specifically powered by AI. As an example, YouTube uses sophisticated algorithms to suggest which content to show their users. Smaller companies like Stitch Fix or Il Makiage have consumers take quizzes where they indicate their preferences and styles, and then these companies use this information to deliver or send personally recommended products to its consumers. So a very practical question to ask here is, who is more open to using personalized recommendation services? And we thought that this question might be related to how much variety consumers had in the past. Some consumers have very low variety in their consumption. They eat the same food every day, they wear the same clothes every day. Meanwhile, some consumers are very high variety consumers. They eat very different kinds of food, wear different kinds of clothes every day. So now I want you to internally make a vote. Which consumer do you think would be more open to using a personalized recommendation service? I'll give you 3 seconds. What we find in our paper is that it's the high variety consumers that are more open to using personalized recommendation services. And perhaps you're surprised, just like we were when we found this result, because we originally predicted that it's the low variety consumers, people who eat the same food every day, are the ones who should be more open to external suggestions. But when we found this result, we realized, that actually makes sense for different reasons. We found that once you consume a high variety of products, you realize that there are a lot of options available for you to consume in the near future. And in reality, consumers use personalized recommendation services when they need help to narrow their options and find the product that matches their preferences. Therefore, it's those who recognize the vastness of product options available for them to consume in the near future, in other words, the high variety consumers, that should be more open or willing to try these recommendations so that they can make a decision. We conducted 4 studies and we tested the effect across various product categories like food, clothes, and music. For example, in study 2, we had participants imagine having had food dishes that are very high variety, so many different kinds of food across the past week, or having participants imagine that they consumed very low variety. They ate the same food over and over again. To all participants, we introduced this app named Let Us Plan Your Meal, which gives suggestions for new meals and creates automatized shopping lists based on AI. And we asked participants, so how open are you willing to try this app? And what we found is that it was those who imagined having consumed a high variety of food dishes the past week that were more open to trying this app. In study 4, we had participants consume during the study. We had all participants listen to these 5 songs. The same 5 songs. And then those in the high variety condition were asked to write how different these songs are from each other. And this was trying to make them realize that they had high variety in their consumption. Then those in the control condition were asked just to simply listen to these songs. Just to emphasize, the consumption experience was exactly the same. And then all participants were introduced to Rhythm Reveal, which gives personalized music recommendations to its users. And again, we asked them, so how open are you to trying Rhythm Reveal? What we found is the following. First of all, we replicated previous studies. We found that it's those who focused on the differences in their consumption experience, thereby realizing or thinking that they had high variety in their consumption. These consumers are the ones who are more open to trying this app or this service. But what we also find is that the effect was moderated by decision difficulty. So consumers who think deciding which music to listen to next as a very inherently difficult task, for these consumers, they're already open to using rhythm reveal that can narrow their options and help them make a decision. So for these consumers, past variety didn't matter. They generally just had a high willingness to try. And a bonus finding we had is that this effect was stronger for AI recommendations than human recommendations. So to conclude, we think that this finding not only contributes to variety seeking or AI aversion literature, but it provides a clear practical implication to services like Stitch Fix. We suggest that not only that these companies should focus or target high variety consumers, but we also find that they can increase general interest in their product by having consumers focus on how much variety they had in the past. For instance, if you're the owner of Stitch Fix, you could emphasize how each of the clothes consumers have been wearing are very different from each other. So that's all I have today. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Sonia. And with that, we'll go to the next speaker, who's Berkeley Dietvorst, Associate Professor of Marketing at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business.
All right. Well, thanks for giving me the venue to share this research with everybody. This research was really motivated by the fact that predictive algorithms are increasingly becoming consumer-facing products. So we've seen already navigation, recommendation, investing. Consumers can use algorithms to make all kinds of predictions. But when doing this research, researchers often treat predictive algorithms as a monolith. And I'm guilty of this myself in some of my past research. We expose people to one algorithm and see how likely they are to use it or test their feelings about it. And then we draw general conclusions about all algorithms. But there's infinite potential algorithms that we could build, and maybe people like some algorithms more than others. So we wanted to kind of start to investigate, are there some types of algorithms people like using more than others? And to start this investigation, we turned to the literature on prediction, because our idea was, well, if we understand how lay people make predictions, then we might understand what prediction agents or what prediction processes they may favor. So we started with the concept of representativeness that was introduced by Kahneman and Tversky, that people use to judge the likelihood of outcomes. So outcomes are more representative when they reflect the essential properties of the process or model that produces them. So people might ask the question, does the outcome match the process? So for a pretty simple example, Kahneman and Tversky ran a lot of studies where they asked people how likely different sequences of coin flips are. So you can see these two sequences here. Participants might be asked, which one of these two sequences is more likely? If they're using representatives to judge this, they might ask which outcome or sequence matches the process of flipping a coin. And most people think it's sequence 2. Because a coin flip is, right, 50-50 heads or tails. It alternates between heads and tails. And this outcome matches the process of flipping a coin more. So people say it's more likely often, even though both these sequences are actually equally likely. So our question was, how can we extend this to judging algorithms or prediction processes instead of judging outcomes? So we made a new term that you might like or not like called replicativeness. And the idea here is that prediction processes are more replicative when they better copy or replicate the process that generates outcomes. So a question that consumers might ask themselves about replicativeness would be, does the prediction process match the generation process? And as a really simple example, if someone's predicting a coin flip, they might see flipping a separate coin as a really replicative way to make that prediction because they're literally replicating the process, where doing a really abstract math problem might not seem very replicative because that doesn't really seem like matching the process of flipping a coin. So I just have time to share a little bit from one of our studies in the paper. There's plenty more there. In this study, participants were making incentivized bets on 9 real basketball games that would take place the day after the study. And they could choose between 2 models to make these bets. Model E was based entirely on team metrics. So your record, who you've beat, who you've lost to. Model R is based entirely on individual players. So a team's quality is the sum of the quality of the individual players. So 2 very different ways to model basketball teams, both real models built by Nate Silver. What we manipulated between conditions was the way we asked the question. In the team condition, it was pretty straightforward. Which team will win the game? In the individual condition, it was which set of individual players will score more points per minute on average. Now, given the rules of basketball, the team that scores more points per minute on average wins the game. So we're really asking the same question here, but the idea was that this individual framing might make Model R seem more replicative because projecting individual players might be more replicating the process of individual people scoring points. And that's kind of exactly what we found. So you can see here, in general, when you ask people, they like Model E because they think basketball is a team sport. But when we had people predict which set of individual players will score more points, they actually are significantly more likely to choose Model R. And this is kind of interesting because it's actually Nate Silver's preferred model because it's a little more accurate. So we could kind of reframe the question to nudge people into choosing the better model just by framing the question to be more replicative. So we have a lot more studies on that in the paper that if you think that's interesting, you might find interesting as well. The general takeaway is that people may be more likely to use algorithms that they perceive to be replicative. And this has a lot of implications for marketers because we can both build models to be more replicative. Now, sometimes that's a bad idea because a lot of times replicative models don't perform very well. And in those cases, we can just reframe or describe models to be replicative. So I think we can do this with investing and recommendation and navigation. For example, one really replicative way to describe navigation could be this algorithm models real-time current traffic flows very minutely so that it can recreate your trip step by step and tell you how long it's going to take if you take different routes. That could be, for example, a very replicative way to describe one of these algorithms and attract consumers to your model rather than a different one. So one note to end with, perceived replicativeness is subjective. It's not an objective thing because it has to do with how you believe the generation process works and how you believe the algorithm works. And so this is something we need to reach out to consumers and ask our target customers about to learn what they think replicativeness is so that we can describe things in terms that they'll find attractive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Berkeley. And we move on to our next speaker, Umair Usman, Assistant Professor of Marketing and Logistics or Marketing at Florida International University.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to present my work here with my esteemed colleagues. Our work is titled The Persuasive Power of AI Ingratiation. And the whole idea of this comes from the fact that we know a lot of research that has been revolving around making AI more human-like. And we have seen in the presentations that just were presented right now that AI is not just only a predictive tool, it is also recommending products to consumers, and it's involved in most spheres of our lives these days. So we wanted to see whether a very common selling tactic, which is ingratiation used by salespeople, is in fact an effective way to be able to make products more exciting for consumers, right? So, and we know that with the advent of ChatGPT, the more human-like conversation styles of our Siris and Alexas, it is becoming more relevant to study. So ingratiation basically includes things like flattery, opinion conformity, or even favor rendering. And from recent research, we know that there's positive effects of ingratiation on the ingratiator as it fulfills the self-enhancement purposes of the target or the information receiver. However, we also know that access to persuasion knowledge basically makes salient the ulterior motives of the ingratiator, in which case it might backfire. Now, what we know about consumers' label belief within a human-like AI that is human-like or machine-like, we see that there's mixed effects of endowing human-like capabilities and features to AI. We know from research that AI is perceived as something more objective than human, so there's less likely to be biased. And we know that human-like AI are perceived to be more trustworthy, they're perceived to be more capable affectively. On the same line, we also know that their agency and ulterior motives are very salient if they're more human-like. And so building on the persuasion knowledge model and computers as social actors theory, we basically predict that ingratiation from a machine-like AI will lead to higher recommendation acceptance from the users. And it also influences their perception of the objectivity of the AI because it fulfills their self-enhancement objectives. We test our hypotheses across different studies. I'm going to quickly show those to you. In study one, we basically asked participants to take a survey, and then we gave them a feedback. They were either flattered or not in that feedback. And all of this was being basically be done by AI. So they were then told that the AI that just evaluated you is recommending you a bunch of products. How likely are you to buy them? And also that the AI that just evaluated you has made several predictions about future events. How accurate do you think they are? And we find that ingratiation from a machine-like AI actually leads to higher recommendation mediated by predictive accuracy perceptions. In study 1B, we took the study more real interaction ways. And we also tested a different context, which was opinion conformity versus non-conformity, which is another form of ingratiation. And in this study, we basically used an Alexa Echo Dot that we programmed to deliver the manipulation. So half of the participants received an opinion conforming message, the other half did not. And we asked them the same DVs and the mediator, and we replicate our finding from study 1A. In study 2, we basically used the same stimuli as study 1A, but we added another factor, which was the AI type, and we manipulated whether it was machine-like or human-like based on the research from Kim and Duacek in 2020. Specifically, participants either saw the image on the left, which manipulated the machine-like AI condition, or the image on the right for the human-like AI condition. And we found that when a machine-like AI ingratiated itself with the users, it led to higher recommendation acceptance and perceptions of accuracy compared to when a human-like AI made those recommendations. Our index of moderate mediation was also significant, thereby supporting our model right here. And then the last study, we basically had them do the same study again, which was study 2, but in this one, everybody received a flattering remark, except that we only manipulated the AI type, and we also measured the ulterior motives of the AI. Results showed that machine-like AI was perceived to be having less ulterior motives, which subsequently had an effect on predictive accuracy perceptions and recommendation acceptance. So from this research, we basically showed that ingratiation is not universally effective across all AI types, and therefore we identify a very interesting boundary condition in the AI anthropomorphism literature, where we show that human-like AI might not be well suited for this situation. We also show that perceptions about AI predictive accuracy can be influenced by ingratiation. So not all AI, so maybe, if AI developers start ingratiating the users, false information or misinformation might also get accepted real soon. And finally, we introduce a real human AI interaction paradigm, so that might be easy to use. There's more details on that in the paper. From a practical standpoint, we show that there's a trade-off in making AI more human-like or more effective in marketing communications. And we also suggest that consumers could be profiled based on their tendency to anthropomorphize the AI. So that's it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Meyer. Very good. And go to our next speaker, who's Shirley Bluestein, an assistant professor of marketing at the Cy Sims School of Business at Yeshiva University.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Let me just share my screen real quick. All right. Okay, hello. My name is Shirley and Bluestein, and I'll be presenting our work, which explores the humanizing potential of errors in text-based communication. So today, online text-based interactions have become a common, if not the dominant mean of communication between companies and consumers. Using chatbots is a very cost-effective way for companies, as we know, but with the advent of AI-powered chatbots, consumers sometimes struggle to ascertain the humanness of their online interaction partners. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes we're 100% sure that we are communicating with a bot, and other times we're confident that we're chatting with a real human agent. But a lot of the times, we cannot really detect whether there is a real person or a robot behind the screen. And this is important because people have a strong preference towards receiving service and being helped by another human. And at the least, they prefer to interact with human-like machines. As such, researchers have explored many ways to influence users' perceptions of online agents humanists. Most studies aim to design the perfect algorithm that are able to interact flawlessly with no errors. In this project, we identify a novel cue to humanizing a communicator, and that is through errors in the text. We propose that humans are only humans and that humans make mistakes. We'll look at a particular form of a mistake in written communications, typographical errors. So on one hand, research have found that errors in text may lead to negative social perceptions of a communicator. On the other hand, other research has found that errors could be seen as positive and fondly humanizing sometimes. In light of these opposing findings, we suggest that an error is neither inherently humanizing nor dehumanizing, but what comes after the error is the key. Correcting an error may signal that there is an intentional mind behind the text who is engaged in social awareness. And as machines lack these capacities, error correction has the potential of conveying a human-like mind behind the text. Specifically, we predict that people will perceive an online chat agent who makes and subsequently corrects their typographical errors as more human than an agent who does not make errors at all. You have 5 studies in this paper altogether. For the first study, we pre-programmed a chatbot who conversed with participants. In one condition, the chat agent was programmed to make typos in the text and then correct them. In another condition, there were no typos made. Participants rated the humanness of the agent, and we found that those who conversed with an agent who made and corrected typos in the text also rated this agent as higher on humanness. We replicated this effect using a different study in a lab with participants who interacted with another human. We used trained research assistants as the online agents, and we found similar effect on humanist perception. We then replicated this effect using a different pre-programmed chat platform, a different typo, and across 3 different customer service contexts. The only significant result was the main effect of typo, which is presented. Those who conversed with an agent who made and corrected typo, again, rated this agent higher on humanist perception. In this study, we also measured a behavioral consequence of perceived helpfulness and found that the agent who corrected typos was also perceived to be more helpful, and that humanist perception mediated the effect of typo on perceived helpfulness. We then wanted to show that it is indeed the correction of the error, but not the error alone, that leads to greater humanist perceptions. Participants in this study were randomly assigned to 3 conditions: corrected typo, uncorrected typo, or no typo at all. And we found that compared to both no typo and uncorrected typo, an agent who made and corrected typos was rated as higher in humanness. Finally, we examined whether these results could be replicated when the identity of the agent is either ambiguous, unknown, or known to be a chatbot, or known to be a human. Across all identity conditions, corrected typos led to greater humanist perceptions compared to no typo. The effect of identity was also significant, as well as the interaction, such that the difference in humanist perception was the greatest for an ambiguous agent, followed by a human agent, and for a known to be chatbot. Perceived helpfulness was greater when the agent made a typo and corrected it. And again, humanist perception mediated the effect of typo on perceived helpfulness. Just to conclude, we find that correction of an error, but not an error alone, in text-based communications increases humanist perception and leads to positive behavioral consequences. And as a final note, in times where the AI is designed to be flawless, we find that imperfections may be a hallmark of humanists. We thank you so much from me and from my team.
Thank you so much, Shirley. And with that, we will go to who I believe is our last speaker, Yue Zhang, a PhD candidate at the Department of Marketing Management at Erasmus University in Rotterdam.
Thank you, Klaus. And hi, everyone. I'm Yue. I'm going to present a joint project with Miriam and Anna, and this project is about a novel intervention that can increase the perceived helpfulness of AI feedback. First of all, are you interested in improving your leadership skills, photography skill, or perhaps marketing skills? If the answer is yes, then the good news is that AI coaches nowadays can help you enhance your skills across a wide range of domains at minimal cost. Take photography, for example. You can now snap a photo and send it to an AI coach, and you will receive customized feedback on how to improve your skills. Learning from feedback provided by AI coaches can help people improve their skills more quickly and more cost-effectively. However, previous research suggests that people often underappreciate AI advice. For example, even when AI achieves the same objective performance as humans, people are less likely to utilize healthcare from an AI provider and tend to trust AI less when tasks that seem subjective, such as writing news article or composing songs. And previous research attributes this underappreciation to various biased beliefs that people hold toward AI. For instance, they believe that AI tend to ignore their uniqueness. And in this project, we propose that one understudied source of bias is a tendency of people to perceive AI as a self-standing, independent entity. This perspective is apparent on social media, where humans and AI are often portrayed as being in opposition, human versus AI, implying that they are two separate entities. This view may artificially inflate the extent to which AI coaches can generate feedback independently of human inputs. In reality, the AI feedback is often a product of both human input and AI input. And this view is reflected in the human-in-the-loop literature, which is defined as the integration of human workforce in the AI pipeline to train and validate models continuously. That is to say, human experts usually actively select training data, validate output, and modify AI models. And in this research, we propose that one effective way to overcome the underappreciation of AI feedback is to emphasize the role of human input in the AI coaches. For instance, the AI photography coach website highlights that the AI was developed by a team of experienced photographers and AI experts. And to test this prediction, we will focus on perceived helpfulness of AI feedback, as perceived helpfulness is an important driver of sales-related outcomes. In one study, for instance, we invited participants to join a photography training session where they took a photo of a cup and uploaded it online, and then they will receive and evaluate feedback from an AI coach. We randomly assigned participants to one of three groups. While they are waiting for their feedback on their photos, participants read different information about the AI coach. In the control group, participants simply learned that they will receive feedback very soon. In the machine input condition, participants learned that the AI coach was created using machine learning algorithms and a vast data set of photos. In the human input condition, which was our focal manipulation, we emphasized the role of human experts, explaining that the AI coach was developed with input from data scientists and photography experts. And the results suggest that the perceived helpfulness was higher in the highlighting human input condition than in the control group and also in the highlighting machine input condition, suggesting that highlighting human input in the development stage of the AI coach can increase the perceived helpfulness of the AI feedback. This research project provides an easy-to-implement intervention. Simply highlighting human input can increase the perceived helpfulness of AI feedback, and it may help the AI coaches to be more successful in the market. And in our paper, we also suggest that this occurs because it helps people better understand how the feedback is generated. Thanks for listening. Please feel free to check our paper and share your thoughts with us. And here is my email. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Yui. So this concludes the presentations, at which point we can move on to a Q&A session. Just one thing that I wanted to mention before I give Stefano before Stefano starts basically the discussion part. The publisher, the University of Chicago Press, is currently working on a way to make the articles available for free to the participants and to all of you, the participants in the webinar right now. They've run into some technical glitch. This may take a little longer, but hopefully there will be a way, and you'll be informed by email by this, by digital@INSEAD. Stefano.
Okay, thanks, Klaus, and thank you all for the presentation and for sticking to the time, which means that we do have a fair amount of time for conversation. We have about basically 29 minutes. I think that should offer the opportunity to go a little deeper and steer the conversation also in the direction of your own interest. So please do continue asking those questions. There is the question that has the most upvotes right now in the open section is from Michael, and that is actually for me and Klaus. So I'm going to attempt to give an answer and then see if Klaus has a different one. Before I do that, though, I want to add that our authors and presenters have been great because they've been answering a lot of questions. And in the answered panel, you can see a very engaging conversation with multiple replies. And so I think that's great to see. But it does raise a question for us. Do we go through the answered list or do we leave it at that? So we'll see a little bit also what pops up in the open section. But certainly there are some common themes across some of the answered questions that we can bounce back to the authors. So let's see how that goes. But just to start with Michael's question, I'm going to read it. Michael asks, could the special issue editor provide a meta view research on consumers and AI using a general CB framework as a reference? Where is AI research emerging and where it is not? Okay, so that itself, I think, would be a long thing to discuss. We're not going to go into any great detail, but I thought I shared just a thought which is articulated around the title of the issue, in fact. And Klaus and I, at the very beginning, when Vicky asked us to do this, we were thinking about what kind of angle would we take to the issue. And we decided to emphasize automation of marketing and consumption. And I think that already gives maybe an answer, a first cut answer to Michael's question, in that you could say that automation can impact consumers in two different ways. It can impact consumers directly and indirectly. So it could impact consumers through the deployment of automated features in products and services that companies, through innovation, bring to market. And it could also be direct because of a firm decision to automate frontline services. So now, like you might not be able to easily to speak to a customer representative, but speak to a chatbot. Now, in this kind of direct approach, a consumer is experiencing the automation. It's part of their consumption, basically. In their world now, there is this automation. And there's a lot of research in this area going on right now, and it's already been going on for a number of years. I think in the issue, we feature quite a few papers of that kind. And the label that has been studied for the main phenomenon here is actually thanks to Berkeley's paper. We're very happy that he was able to be here today, which is this notion of algorithm aversion, which is tend to be interpreted as people tend to respond, all else being equally, more favorably to a human providing a service or giving you feedback or recommendation or whatever than to an algorithm. Now, there's lots and lots of boundary conditions, lots and lots of different psychological processes that can drive this effect. But that's kind of like a one big line of research among a few on this direct view of how automation directly impacts consumers. But Klaus and I wanted to also feature articles that had a more indirect approach, because marketeers are also employing automations to take decisions that impact consumers. Although consumers may not be privy of that adoption by marketeers, the Maybe the most obvious example here would be algorithmic pricing, where prices are adjusted automatically based on lots of factors and demand and competition and so forth. And, you know, for example, Nufar's paper that was looking at this idea of algorithmic pricing. And here, the impact often has been on consumer welfare and on profitability, and trying to understand what are the implications of you know, firms adopting automation, automated decision-making in various aspects for consumers. More recently, for example, there is a new stream of research emerging on the use of generative AI for the production of advertising messages and personalized messages. And so often these papers document quite powerful effects of tools like generative AI. Okay, I'm going to stop it at this. And but I think this will be a very interesting conversation to have, you know, where this research is going, this field is going. It is, I don't say taking over the field of consumer research. There's a lot of work in all kinds of areas in consumer research, but certainly automation has emerged in the last 5 to 10 years as one of the most vibrant and I think interesting area of research. Okay, so what I would suggest, Klaus, do you want to go with a question? Do you want to provide a different answer to the same question? Or what do you want to do?
Not to provide a different answer to the same question. Maybe I'll just push it a little further. I completely agree with you, Stefano. I think most of what we've seen, most of the research in consumer behavior, at least on automation, has been about the comparison of humans or of how consumers respond to humans versus algorithms. I think we're moving beyond that now. I think in the future, the more work will be about how simply to adapt algorithms to make them more palatable to consumers. So the comparison with humans is perhaps not so relevant anymore because algorithms have simply become a reality in business. What I personally find very interesting, but this is perhaps less an answer to the question, but more really an outlook of my own personal view, where I see the field potentially going, where I see research opportunities, and I know, Stephanie, you agree with that, is when we look at AI, we are, for the first time, we're confronted with an intelligence that's not human anymore. How does that, what does that reveal to us as consumers about our own psychology? I think that's perhaps a question that's interesting for consumer researchers. I'm not so sure about the extent to which this is particularly interesting to practitioners. So I think the field may sort of bifurcate a little bit on the practitioner end. How can we make algorithms more palatable? And we've seen a number of examples in our in this issue of JACR. And on the more psychological end of it, what does AI actually tell humans about their own intelligence and about their own humanity, if you will? But I'll stop it at that. I see that the second most highly voted question was by Nailya Odabaryeva. Her question is for Shirley. She's asking, how common is it for a machine run agent to make errors such as typos? Seems like likely than a human run. I guess it seems less likely than a human run agent. Shirley.
Yes, hello, and I was just typing an answer. I didn't know that I would be the one answering it in front of it. Yes, so this is a very good question. It is true that in order for a machine to make a typo and then correct it, there is needing to be someone behind that machine to actually use that typo as a way to maybe exploit consumers. And we give a generous discussion about this in the discussion point in the paper. So I'm going to suggest that everyone would go and read about this, because it really took the time to kind of make sure that we do not use these findings to exploit any consumer in the future, that the company should adopt these findings, but that merely to educate consumers. So we also suggest in the discussion point is that we don't think that it's only typos, correction of typos. Anything that could imply a human-like mind behind correction of any type of error. So there are a lot of errors that actually machines do, right? So maybe it could be a weird note in the text, or maybe it could be misinformation. And those things, although are not specifically studied in this manuscript, are discussed in the way in the discussion point. We kind of say, there are multiple errors that the correction of them, multiple types of errors, not only typos, that the correction of them should lead to the same result. Yeah, so we don't want to be only narrowed about typos specifically, and we of course do not want companies to adopt it. But we do think that it's the correction of any type of a mistake that could lead to these findings again and again.
Thank you, Shirley. And I was looking at the answered questions, and there is one by Anne, hi Anne Conrad, and the question was for Nofar, and she was asking, I was wondering, we seem to forget that behind any algorithm there is a human who programmed it to be like that. Is it right? And so I actually would like to, I know that Nufar provided a reply, but I would like to ask Nufar to maybe revisit that in a broader sense, beyond even her data, to think a little bit about the relationship that consumers may have with marketplace cues as they become more versus less aware of there being people behind or being just an automated black box. And I'm picking this question not only because it was the most upvoted one, but also because I think it's a question, the human behind the machine, which I think fits quite well also with presentations by Shirley. By the way, you just talked about the notion of, you know, how these things are programmed, but maybe also US work on the you know, the humans behind the algorithm. So I'll invite first Nufar to revisit that idea of the human behind the machine. But then I would like, if they would like to jump in also for Yue and maybe Shirley to add, or anyone else here among the presenters.
Yeah, thanks for that. And so I did answer a bit more narrowly in the actual chat to say, you know, consumers don't necessarily think that far. That's what our studies suggest. And so let me kind of elaborate on that and then take it further. In our studies, we actually try to play with that. We try to remind consumers that there was a person behind the algorithm, that somebody programmed it to make the decision in this way. And we find that it didn't really budge consumers' evaluations. So there was something about the algorithm itself that gave it legitimacy, that even when we reinforced and reminded them that somebody was behind it, maybe directing its actions, consumers still evaluated the decision to price discriminate based on demographics as fairer when an algorithm was involved in the process, even when it was programmed by a person. I think the bigger question, Stefano, that you're asking is a really interesting one, is these algorithms are becoming so complex. It's not necessarily the case that there is a person behind it telling it what to do, right? We have a lot of unsupervised decisions being made by algorithms. They're being made in a way that is multi-layered, multifaceted. It's actually quite often really difficult to know what it used in its decision-making processes to come to a certain decision to act one way or another. And so when we think about consumers and their ability to sound the alarms or to really recognize when practices are violating social norms, it might become more and more complicated, more and more hard to detect. And so I think this is a bigger question. I wish I had the answer to that, but I think as these marketplace practices become more and more complicated, it will become even less obvious to consumers when certain actions are violating existing norms. And so the general trajectory of that might be, well, honestly, simply quite alarming. That's my 2 cents.
I think you raised question about consumer welfare, but maybe we're not fully under control when we deploy algorithms at scale, which are, you know, largely a black box. From a consumer point of view, of course, you have effects about, you know, what's happening when you reveal that there is someone behind or not. And I don't want to pick on anyone, but I would like to check if Yue or Shirley, or maybe I think also Anna's presentation might be relevant to the theme of you know, the human behind the algorithm and whether consumers are privy to that and what happens when they do. Anyone wants to step in? No pressure.
Yeah,
if you don't.
I do have a
Go ahead, Anna.
comment. And this was something that, in fact, Klaus discussed in our choice symposium, that consumers by default have this automatic bias of always thinking that there's a human behind, and trusting these machines as if they were humans, in general, with our best interest in mind. And that's why in the public policy implications of our paper, we propose that educating the consumer that at the end, machines are programmed and they are basically going to follow the program and nothing else, is very important to develop a consumer that can actually make educated decisions. I think Shirley is agreeing.
Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I 100% agree. 100% agreement here. Just a quick note that in our studies, just to remind you about the typos, which are humanizing, we measured levels of anger, negative emotions, and satisfactions, and we did not find any differences across conditions, such that people do not necessarily think about making those 2 steps ahead. I'm sure that people would eventually, but it doesn't seem in the data in the studies that people do think that someone has intentionally behind the screen was trying to manipulate them somehow.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, this makes a nice link also to the presentation by Umair on ingratiation, where basically the mechanism there was this idea of persuasion knowledge. All of a sudden, with a more humanized, human-like AI, I'm more aware of the fact that I'm being kind of manipulated. Umair, do you want to add anything? So to cold calling you, but
just a little bit on that. So I agree with the fact that most people think that there's a human behind, and as researchers, we are always thinking about like what's the source effect, who made the AI and why it's behaving like that. Kind of questions come into our minds. But I think like as a layperson, maybe they're looking at this machine and they go with like the input-output process. But the moment you nudge them in the direction that there might be a human element to it, which we show in our studies, it makes them start thinking about the ulterior motives of it. Why? Like it starts making them think about why is it happening as opposed to what's happening. So I think that's both of my co-authors, Tae-Woo Kim and Adam Duacek, had a paper in 2020 that showed that people think about AI at different control level than they think about humans, and influences their persuasive capabilities. And so maybe that's at play. So the moment you nudge them in the direction of the humanness or a human developer at the back end, it just changes the question altogether.
Thank you. That's a great point. And let's see if we can get also Yue to comment on their study, because there is more about maybe also providing firms with some ideas about how they might be able to deploy algorithms in a way that consumers might be able to trust them and use them more.
Thanks, Stefano, for mentioning that. Actually, in our paper, to begin with, I think there are many different types of human input, and in our paper, we only specifically focus on the human input, the expertise in the development stage of the AI coaches. And we found that indeed this makes a difference in terms of the perceived helpfulness, the perception of the output generated by the AI, and improves the perceived helpfulness. But we are also open for future research, like different types of human input. Like for instance, like if you highlight that this AI is trained based on human generated data, or we are also interested in like different proportion of human input, because in our manipulation we did not mention like how much human input in this development stage, or like, and also there are different other types, like human experts can directly check and modify the output, and whether that can also change our perception. So this is a wide topic, and we just review a small piece of it, I think.
Thank you, Yue. I see now that in the participant panel, I see Nofar has a hand raised. I don't know if she...
Yeah, I do. I was going to just piggyback on Anna's point, which I think is a really valid one, right, about educating consumers. And I want to go with that and kind of suggest that there may be a need to take the things even one step further. So at least in the context of fairness, which is what I studied in this project, I think people have a very intuitive and almost visceral reaction to these practices when they learn that like an algorithm versus a person is behind it. And it's definitely valuable to educate them, but I don't think we can completely let go of the reins and just expect that by educating consumers, we will solve all of these, we will solve these issues and no need for further intervention would be required. I actually think there is something here to be made about necessary regulations. We know that consumers, at least in the context of fairness, they respond from their gut quite often, more than they have these very clearly defined rules or understanding of what is and isn't right. And it may be the case that the use of these algorithms, whatever reaction consumers have to them, we can't expect it to be the burden to be on them to sound the alarms, even though I said this previously, right? So I think there is a need for regulators to step in and detect and monitor the way these practices are being implemented above and beyond what consumers are able of noticing.
So if I can also jump in just briefly and link it back to Michael's question of where consumer research on algorithms and automation is going, there's a large literature in computer science on how to put humans in the loop. So I think that's a literature which we can, as consumer researchers, to which we can look essentially for trying to figure out how psychology can help actually to put humans in the loop. But it also points toward how practitioners should and could perhaps explain to customers what the role of the human is, in fact, in collaborating with the algorithm. I think from a legislative perspective, from a regulatory perspective, this will become very important. Marketers simply have to explain what the role of the human is versus what the algorithm is. Now, we've been talking about just a small number of questions. Most of them, as Stefano had said, were answered already. The answered ones actually generated higher votes than the unanswered ones. I would perhaps encourage all our authors to try to answer the open unanswered questions. But for us in the discussion here, maybe we can just go to some of those that generated a few more votes. For example, Akshay's question to Sonia, which is the following. Is it possible that customers with low variety preferences have stronger constraints in their choices, for example, vegans? If so, then if an AI algorithm were to recommend options that fulfill their constraints, would such customers show high acceptance of such options? Essentially, such customers show low acceptance of AI recommendations, probably one, because they don't believe there exist many options, or two, they don't believe the AI algorithm accurately captures their strong constraints.
Yeah, thank you so much, Klaus. And I did answer a bit on the chat, but that's a great question. If we think about low variety consumers and understanding them, it might not just be a preference that I just want low variety. In fact, there may be limitations in the consumption that they can actually enact. But at least in our studies, we try to get away from that. So we did that in a couple of ways. First, the music study that I introduced, we didn't have a low variety condition. We only had a control condition where people listen to music. And then we had a high variety condition where consumers are told to distinguish between each music. So here we facilitated the thought about high variety in one condition and not in the other. So here we see the effect, which means that the effect is likely driven by high variety consumers that want to really try this service more than control groups. And in another study, we actually introduced a service that doesn't require you to explore new options. So what we did is kind of a spin-off of Stitch Fix. We said this service, which is called We Style, you take a picture of your wardrobe and all the clothes you have, and then this service with the fee will recommend styles for you. So make combinations of the clothes you already have and give you what you can wear next time. So in this situation as well, so here, even for consumers that have dietary restrictions or restrictions of what kind of clothes they can wear, that's fixed, right? You already have a wardrobe, and then the service simply recommends what you can wear next. And so for this situation as well, we find the effect, which means that it might not only be driven by low variety consumers simply avoiding recommendations because they don't think there are viable options out there. But actually, his question actually brought me to think about, we've had a lot of thought about why do people use algorithms for recommendations? And is it to explore new options or to narrow options? Because one thing that algorithms can do is show them options that they've never explored before. You might also like this. So is this kind of opening the consideration set wider? Or do consumers actually want the, algorithms to pick and choose among this huge set of options available for me to make an easier decision? And at least in our studies, we find that people often use these recommendations to narrow their options rather than explore new options. But I like briefly breezed over it, and we probably have to investigate this further. We find that the effect doesn't replicate for human recommendations. And that actually brought an interesting point, maybe kind of connecting back to the previous discussion. When people are getting recommendations from algorithms versus recommendations from people, perhaps they're expecting different things here now too. Maybe they think algorithms know all the options out there, therefore they know which ones to pick for you, as opposed to human recommendations. Perhaps they think other humans, like local residents, just give you options that they think is the best, or give you options that you might not know. So in this case, maybe consumers predict human recommendations are really for me to explore rather than narrow my options. So this needs further investigation, as I mentioned, but at least for algorithms, we think they want to use algorithms to narrow their choices.
Thank you, Sonia. And I was going through the list of questions and also thinking about broader themes, and I see a question. Thought we only have 5 minutes, but I thought I picked this up, and it's from Dan Lofer. Hi, Dan. Good to see you here. And it was a question about mistakes. I think it was originally a narrower one, but I think it has an interesting question for others. So he said, how do consumers react when companies explain that mistakes have been made by AI system versus people beyond pricing? So I think it is an interesting question about how do you explain performance and mistakes. And for this one, I like to call again the two remaining speakers who haven't been addressed in this Q&A, which are Stuti Agrawal and Berkeley Discourse, because I think representation both, I think, relate to this potentially to this notion of how do we deal with the mistakes. And so if I can ask Stuti to comment on this notion with the autonomous vehicles, and then maybe Berkeley wrap up. And I would love if Berkeley were also able to, maybe as a person who started this, had the first paper on algorithm version, also the best cited, if he can just also comment in 1 minute on what he thinks might be next for this stream of research. But Stuti, please go ahead.
Thanks, Stefano. Yeah, it's an interesting topic to think about how people react to mistakes made by AVs versus people. My immediate instinct would be that if AVs make a mistake, people think of it as sort of worse. And to that point, one of my co-authors, Julian, has a project where he actually looks at how people think about AVs when they're in accident scenarios, and how like people assign responsibility to either the AV versus the human that's in the AV when they're in sort of an accident situation. And one thing that he finds is how like the labeling itself of the AV has an impact on this. So like Tesla, for example, has obviously their autopilots, which are AVs with level 2 automation. And we find in that paper that calling something an autopilot makes it seem like it can do much more than it actually can. And in that situation where there's an accident or an error, people are much more likely to assign blame to that AV. So I think there are different factors here that can influence, but in general, I do think people would be less forgiving of AVs making a mistake because they're supposed to be infallible, right? That's the whole point. If you're promoting safety as the primary benefit of an AV, then you'll definitely be a lot less forgiving of it making errors.
Thank you, Stuti. Great point about also maybe the branding might have implications for how we deal with mistakes. Berkeley.
Yeah, that's a good question. My guess is that in general, the way I see algorithms and AI are essentially they're tools to complete a job, right? So I think there's many factors that can affect people's use of AI, and we've talked about a lot of them in today's sessions. But if I had to pick one that's the most important, it's do people think this is going to perform well? Or do they think it's a tool that can do this job well? And so in general, I would expect the effect of seeing algorithms make mistakes as being negative, because you might update your performance expectations a little bit lower in terms of what that algorithm could do. Now, certainly in certain circumstances, there could be nuance that changes that, right? So for example, in one certain circumstance, if seeming human is really important and making a mistake makes you seem human, then absolutely, maybe there could be something like that. But in general, across the board, if we're talking generally about algorithms, I would anticipate that typically seeing mistakes versus not seeing mistakes is probably a negative thing. And then I think you asked, where do I think this literature is going? There's so much of it, and it's going in so many directions. I think it's hard to say. One area that I'm excited about, I think the next era for algorithms is going to be about extreme personalization. I think this is something we saw in marketing more generally, where, right, once we were able to make products pretty cheaply and widely available, the next thing that happened is really personalized micro-targeted products, right? Where now I can log into Etsy and buy a hat specifically made for my Greyhound. That's not something we could do 50 years ago. I think that's a similar thing is going to happen with algorithms. I think once we build algorithms that function pretty well in general and generally serve a purpose for completing a task, really building more customized algorithms that understand a particular consumer's preferences and interests and circumstances, and then customizing that algorithm to the individual could be one area where this whole field goes next. Not just the consumer behavior research, but also the algorithms themselves.
Thank you,
Berkeley. Pars, go ahead.
We're going to have to wrap it up. I think the idea of personalization, this is what marketing is all about anyway, from segmentation to personalization. So I think I agree with you, we're going to see this more and more in the area of algorithms as well, and applications of AI, personal assistance, and so forth. I wanted to thank you all, both our speakers as well as the audience, for coming to this webinar. It's been a great experience, at least for us, for Stefano and myself. If you have any more questions for the speakers, please email them individually. In fact, if you want copies of their presentations, perhaps they're willing to share those. Again, email them individually. And if you're interested in their work, also email them. With that, I think we will wrap it up. Again, thanks very, very much for showing up for this webinar, the Tech Talk, which was part of our Tech Talk X series by Digital at INSEAD. There'll be many more series, many more talks in the series. Hopefully we'll see you all again. And again, have a wonderful evening, morning, rest of the day, or night, wherever you are. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.